I remember the exact moment my marriage ended. It wasn't during an argument or in a courtroom or even in one of those slow, painful months where two people silently drift apart. It ended with a text message. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my home office finishing up a client report when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting something mundane, maybe a grocery reminder or a message from my brother. Instead, it was my wife. Her text read, "I'm filing for divorce and telling the judge you've been unstable. I'm getting the house no greeting, no explanation. Just that, cold, calculated, and final." For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen. Not because I was shocked we were ending. I'd seen the signs, but because of how she worded it. Unstable. That was the part that stuck with me. That wasn't a spontaneous jab. That was a strategy. And that's when something in me went very still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was calm in a way that almost scared me. I typed back, greater than, "I understand your strategy." Then I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair. Because if she wanted to play that kind of game, she had no idea what she'd just started. You see, my wife, let's call her Emily, had always been smart, manipulative smart, the kind of person who knows exactly what to say to make herself look like the victim in any situation. For years, I'd let her have her way in arguments just to keep the peace. She was beautiful, charming in public, and quick to tears whenever accountability came her way. But she was also impulsive, reckless, and that recklessness was about to cost her everything. A few weeks before that text, I'd noticed a stack of papers left on the printer in our home office. Emily often printed things for her job, lesson plans, reports, the usual. But this stack was thick, over 200 pages. Curiosity got the better of me, and when I picked it up, my stomach dropped. They weren't work documents. They were psychiatric notes, her psychiatric notes. Session after session, spanning nearly 2 years, detailing everything from her severe anxiety and mood swings to discussions about medication noncompliance, emotional instability, and even suicidal ideation. It was raw, personal, and deeply private, and I didn't read them all, out of respect. But I skimmed enough to understand one thing. If she ever tried to paint me as unstable in court, she'd be walking into a minefield of her own making. At the time, I put the papers in a sealed folder and stored them in my desk just in case. I never imagined I'd actually need them. But that Tuesday afternoon changed everything. By evening, I'd stopped replaying her text and started strategizing. I knew Emily. I knew she'd already spoken to a lawyer, maybe even drafted her petition. The unstable accusation wasn't random. It was a legal narrative. In divorce court, perception matters as much as fact, and she was building a case to paint me as emotionally unfit, maybe even dangerous, to get the house in favorable terms. So I decided to wait. Let her make the next move. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived, official divorce papers. Inside, sure enough, were all her claims. Emotional volatility, erratic behavior, controlling tendencies. It was surreal, reading words that described someone I barely recognized. The woman who once cried in my arms because I brought home her favorite coffee after a rough day was now describing me as a man who could not be trusted with responsibility. It was a performance, and a sloppy one. Because for someone accusing me of instability, she sure left a lot of evidence contradicting it. Her emails, her text apologies after our fights, and of course, the psychiatrist's notes she'd left lying around like old receipts. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I scheduled a consultation with my own attorney, a calm, methodical man named Peter. He read the documents silently, flipping through the pages, occasionally raising an eyebrow. When he finished, he set them down and asked, "You said she's claiming you're unstable?" I nodded. He smiled faintly. "And you have her psychiatric records?" I slid the sealed folder across the table. "All 200 pages. She printed them herself." He let out a slow whistle. "Well," he said, "that changes everything." That night, I got another text from Emily. "Greater than, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Let's keep this civil. Please civil." The word made me laugh out loud, because it wasn't civil when she started building lies behind my back. It wasn't civil when she planned to kick me out of the house I paid for while she destroyed my reputation. So I didn't respond. Instead, I spent that weekend organizing every piece of paper, every email, every text, every credit card statement that showed she hadn't contributed a cent to the mortgage in nearly 2 years. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Emily had played her hand. Now it was my turn. When Monday came, Peter sent a short but precise email to Emily's lawyer. Attached, a copy of the 200-page psychiatric file marked as potential discovery evidence. The message was brief, greater than, "Please review the attached materials your client inadvertently left on our client's property. These documents appear relevant to the claims of instability made in the current petition." That was it. No threats, no emotion, just facts. By noon, Emily's lawyer called her first, not me. And within an hour, my phone rang. It wasn't Peter. It was Emily herself. Her voice was trembling, half angry, half panicked. "You sent my private medical records to my lawyer?" she screamed. I didn't raise my voice. "You left them on the printer," I said. "I assumed they were important." "That's a violation." "Of what?" I interrupted. "You left them in our shared home. You made my mental state part of your legal claim. That makes it relevant silence." Just her breathing. Then she said quietly, "You're going to ruin me." I could have said a lot of things. I could have reminded her that she started this, or that she tried to destroy my credibility first. But I didn't. I just said, "You shouldn't have lied, Emily." Then I hung up. 2 days later, Peter called me with an update. Apparently, Emily's lawyer was eager to discuss a settlement. Translation, they'd realized exactly how bad this looked. According to Peter, the opposing counsel sounded frantic on the phone. He'd reviewed the psychiatric notes that painted Emily as emotionally volatile, sometimes irrational, and openly discussing manipulative behaviors in her marriage. It wasn't just embarrassing, it undermined her entire case. "They're willing to drop the claims," Peter said, "and they want to negotiate an even division of assets." I almost laughed. Just a week earlier, she wanted the house, spousal support, and my silence. Now she wanted a quick settlement in confidentiality. But I wasn't done yet, because beyond the legal win, there was something deeper I needed. Closure. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just peace. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be treated as disposable. So I agreed to meet one last time, face to face. We met at a quiet coffee shop near the courthouse. It was mid-morning, sunlight pouring through the windows, the kind of ordinary day that makes extraordinary moments feel strangely surreal. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back, the confidence drained out of her. For a second, I almost pitied her. Then I remembered the text that started it all. She sat down across from me, fiddling with her phone before finally looking up. "I didn't mean for it to get like this," she said softly. "Yes, you did," I replied. "You just didn't think I'd push back." She sighed, shaking her head. "You're cold, you know that?" I was scared. You thought if you got ahead of the story, you'd control it," I said. "That's not fear, Emily. That's manipulation." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't want to lose everything." "You wouldn't have," I said quietly. "You only lost what you tried to steal." She didn't reply. We sat there for a long minute, just silence between two people who once promised forever and ended up here. Strangers negotiating damage. When we left, she didn't say goodbye. She just walked away, her shoulders hunched like the weight of her choices was finally catching up to her. That was months ago. The divorce was finalized quietly, out of court. No accusations, no dramatic trials, no judges reading statements of instability. I got to keep the house. She got her car and a small settlement. The confidentiality clause was her idea. She didn't want anyone to know how close she'd come to public humiliation. Sometimes I still think about that text. How one message can unravel years of pretending, how a single moment of arrogance can expose everything someone tries to hide. And the truth, I didn't ruin her. She ruined herself. After the dust settled, there was this strange quiet that filled my house. The same walls that once echoed with her laughter, her playlists, the clatter of her heels on the hardwood floors, they were silent now. And silence, I've learned, has a way of forcing you to confront everything you've ignored. For the first few weeks, I didn't celebrate. There was no victory playlist, no self-congratulatory drinks, just an odd, hollow calm. I'd won the legal battle, sure, but emotionally I was still sorting through the wreckage of what used to be my life. It's funny, when you're in a relationship that's slowly breaking apart, you don't notice the cracks forming at first. You normalize the small disrespects, the way they roll their eyes when you speak, the sarcastic jokes at your expense, the dismissive tone. You tell yourself it's just stress, just a phase, and before you know it, you're walking on eggshells in your own home, apologizing for things you didn't even do. That's what my marriage had become, a slow erosion disguised as love. When Emily first started therapy, I thought it was a good thing. She'd been struggling with anxiety, and I genuinely wanted to support her. I never judged her for it. I paid for her sessions, encouraged her to stick with her meds, and told her it was okay to not be okay. But somewhere along the way, she began using those vulnerabilities as weapons. If we disagreed, she'd twist it. "You're making me anxious on purpose." If I tried to talk about my own feelings, she'd say, "You're gaslighting me." And if I ever pushed back, I became emotionally unstable. It took me a long time to realize that she wasn't trying to heal. She was trying to control the narrative. Therapy became her alibi, proof that she was the reasonable one, the victim doing the work, while I was the irrational partner who didn't understand. So when that text came, the one declaring her intention to destroy me in court, it wasn't random. It was the final form of a pattern that had been building for years. Control, packaged as self-preservation. After the settlement, Emily moved out of state. I heard through mutual friends that she was focusing on her mental health and taking time to rebuild. Good for her, I guess. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. What I wanted, and what I finally got, was freedom. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. The kind where you don't wake up at 3 a.m., replaying arguments or wondering what mood she'll be in tomorrow. I started cooking in my own kitchen again, without feeling like I was intruding in someone else's space. I even repainted the walls, not to erase her, but to reclaim what was mine. It's hard to explain how heavy manipulation feels until it's gone. When someone's constantly rewriting reality around you, you start doubting your own sanity. You second-guess every reaction, every decision. You stop trusting your memory. But when the fog lifts, when you finally see things clearly, you realize just how much of yourself you gave away to keep the peace. One night, maybe 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I found myself scrolling through old photos. Not out of nostalgia, more like curiosity. There we were, smiling at a dinner party, laughing at the beach, posing at weddings. We looked happy. At least that's what the pictures said. But behind every one of those photos, I could remember the truth. The fight we'd had before the dinner, the argument in the car on the way to the beach, the cold silence after the wedding. The smiles were real, but they were temporary masks we both wore to convince ourselves we were okay. I closed the gallery and deleted everything. Not out of anger, just acceptance. Because here's what people rarely admit. Sometimes love doesn't end with betrayal or tragedy. Sometimes it just rots quietly, until one day you realize the person beside you isn't your partner anymore. They're a stranger who knows all your weaknesses. And in my case, that stranger tried to weaponize them. About a month later, Peter called me again. Not for legal reasons, but just to check in. He told me almost offhandedly that Emily's lawyer had left his firm. Apparently, the whole ordeal had been a professional nightmare for him. He said it was the messiest divorce he's ever seen. Peter chuckled. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt done. I told Peter something that surprised even me. I don't hate her. I just don't trust her with the truth anymore. Because that's what betrayal really is. Not just the loss of love, but the corruption of truth. Once someone shows you they're willing to lie to destroy you, every memory gets tainted. You start wondering if anything they ever said was real. And in my case, I realized I'd been in love with the idea of who she could be, not who she actually was. A few weeks later, I received an email from Emily. It was short, just 2 sentences. "I'm sorry for everything. I was scared. You didn't deserve that." For a long moment, I just stared at it. The part of me that used to crave her validation wanted to respond. But another part, the part that had rebuilt itself brick by brick, knew better. Some apologies don't need answers. They just need distance. So I archived it and went back to my life. I started seeing a therapist myself not long after. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I stayed so long in something that was slowly killing me. She told me something I'll never forget. When you love someone who confuses manipulation for affection, you start mistaking anxiety for excitement. That's not love. That's survival. That hit hard because she was right. For years, I thought the chaos was passion. I thought the ups and downs meant we were fighting for each other. But the truth was, I was just fighting to be understood and losing every round. Now I'm learning to live differently, to find calm instead of chaos, to value quiet instead of drama, to trust that love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled it, sending those psychiatric notes, turning her own evidence against her. I tell them the same thing every time. No, because I didn't expose her out of spite. I did it because she forced my hand, because she decided to weaponize mental health as a shield for her lies. Because when someone tries to destroy your reputation, you're allowed to defend yourself. I didn't ruin her life. I just stopped letting her ruin mine. Months turned into a year. The house doesn't feel haunted anymore. It feels like mine again. The memories that used to sting have softened. The ghosts of her voice, her perfume, her laughter, they're fading. And in their place, there's something I haven't felt in a long time. Peace. Every morning, I make coffee in the same kitchen where we used to argue. I stand by the same window where I once watched her car pull out of the driveway for the last time. And sometimes I smile. Not because I miss her, but because I survived her. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes you don't get justice in the way you expect. You don't get dramatic courtroom showdowns or cinematic karma. Sometimes justice is quiet. It's waking up in your own home, knowing no one's lying about you behind your back. It's peace of mind, it's truth. And it's knowing that when someone tries to weaponize your kindness, your patience, your love, you still came out with your integrity intact. Because people like Emily, they burn everything they touch. And for the first time, I wasn't the one left in ashes. I still have that text saved, though, the one that started it all. Sometimes I scroll back to it, read those words again. Greater than, I'm filing for divorce and telling the judge you've been unstable. I'm getting the house. And then I think about everything that followed. The panic, the phone call, the desperate we need to settle message from her lawyer. It reminds me how quickly arrogance collapses under truth. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could lie her way to victory. But all it took was her own carelessness. 200 pages of her own handwriting to bring it all crashing down. There's a kind of poetic justice in that. If you told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, free, calm, and at peace, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, I thought my world was ending. I thought I'd lose everything. But sometimes endings are just disguised beginnings. I rebuilt from the ground up. I learned that love isn't supposed to make you feel small, that the right person won't use your silence as a weapon, and that when someone tries to define you with lies, you let the truth speak for itself. That's what saved me. Not revenge, not anger, just truth. And when the truth finally came to light, her lawyer wasn't the only one who said, "We need to settle." She did too, with herself, with the lies she told, with the consequences she created. And me, I finally settled with peace.